Good evening. My name is Ian Williams Dessou, and this is my end of class research essay presentation. My topic is on whether eyewitness identification is reliable or not. Leaning more towards the it is unreliable side, but that is my topic. It's on whether eyewitness identification is reliable or not. So, what is eyewitness identification? An eyewitness typically refers to a victim or bystander who was present at the time of an event that is under criminal investigation. The Psychology Dictionary defines it as testable evidence given under an oath in court by an individual who will offer their recollection of a specific event or a timeline of events in relation to a case. Eyewitness testimony and identification has been one of the most recognized forms. I'm sure everyone has heard of it. It's been one of the most recognized forms and used forms of testable evidence used in both civil and criminal trials that dates as far back as using it in the beginning of the 20th century. However, the big however, eyewitnesses are susceptible to a plethora of biases and errors that are able to affect the precision and accuracy of their memory, ranging from the imperfection of human memory to the passage of time to the effects of stress, anxiety, and trauma on the brain. So is eyewitness identification alone enough? Not at all. Research by the NRC, or the National Research Council, found that 75% of wrongful convictions for rape and murder, including a number that led to people being scheduled for execution, were based on eyewitness testimony. And to that I say, justice is very important to a person that is treated unjustly or unfairly. However, it should be distributed equally so that innocent people are not incarcerated for crimes that they did not commit. So, what factors affect eyewitness testimony or eyewitness accuracy? There's stress, anxiety, like I said, trauma on the brain, the passage of time, which we'll get into, bias, repeated exposure, etc., etc. So the first one we're going to go over is that of trauma and stress, as said before. Some of the main explanations for why eyewitnesses might identify a subject falsely is due to trauma and stress, not only during but after a crime happens or after an event occurs. Experiencing or witnessing a crime can obviously be a very disturbing experience, which can force a person to become highly emotional in certain ways, therefore focusing their attention on certain aspects of the situation whilst ignoring other ones. More on stress and trauma. Stress and anxiety are able to tamper with an individual's ability to encode and decipher memories, making it more difficult to recall information later on, or in other words, where it is important to remember in a case or a trial, sitting up on the stand, giving your testimony, saying that this person did it. The misinformation effect is piggybacking off of stress and trauma. The misinformation effect is the tendency for information received after an event to interfere with one's memory of the original happenings. This can occur due to the passage of time, the timing and nature of the misleading information, the individual's cognitive and emotional state, etc., etc. So the more times a witness is exposed to a piece of misinformation, whether that be through the media or people asking you about the experience or the crime that happened, you being there, what happened, whether that be your family or, the police, law enforcement, whoever it may be, the more times a witness is exposed to that information, that misinformation, the greater the effect gets. All right. Now, bias. When an eyewitness is biased, it means that they have certain expectation or preconceived notion about the individual they are identifying, which may influence their identification of the suspect. There are two different types of biases, which we'll get into in the next slide, which are confirmation bias and expectancy bias. Confirmation bias is a cognitive bias that favors information that confirms your previously existing beliefs or biases. For example, people who oppose or support a certain principle will not only research evidence to support what they believe, but they will also interpret new information in a way that, oppose their current principles or, pre-existing beliefs. The second type of bias that we'll talk about is expectancy bias. In other words, experimental bias. This occurs when the people conducting the experiment have certain expectation about what will happen to the subjects and are unconsciously influenced by their preconceived notions. For example, if an eyewitness thinks that a particular type of vehicle was involved in a crime, they may be more prone to remember that vehicle even if it wasn't actually there, obviously leading to confusion later on down the line where it's important. So how do we deal with this? Evidence collaboration. Collaborating eyewitness testimony with other forms of evidence can help to ensure that innocent people do not end up incarcerated, seeing as how during a live lineup, all suspects do look similar to one another, making it relatively easy to identify a wrong target or a wrong suspect. Excuse me. So, the first type of evidence that we can use to collaborate with eyewitness identification or eyewitness testimony is physical evidence. Physical evidence refers to, it's typically a reliable source of evidence because there's no question attached to it ever. So fingerprints, footprints, DNA samples are awesome, examples of physical evidence that can be used to provide details about a crime. Accurate details about a crime, especially paired with eyewitness identification. Forensic evidence is another good way. It's another good form of evidence or a good piece of evidence to collaborate with eyewitness identification. It relates to items collected or information gathered through scientific evidence for its use in legal proceedings. For example, or instance, a ballistics report may assist to identify the weapon in whether a gun was used or not, while a toxicology report may, provide information on whether drugs or alcohol were involved or not. So that is it. Those are just some ways that, those are just some forms of evidence that you can, those are just some forms of evidence that you can collaborate with eyewitness identification to ensure that you have the right person, and that people that did not commit crimes are not wrongfully convicted or sentenced. So that is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed and have a great one. Thank you.